You did not see the test, but you may have already failed the audit. Not a clinical test, a social test, a small moment where someone pushes, jokes, guilt trips, rushes, or questions you just enough to see what leaks out of you. Do you explain yourself? Do you apologize? Do you laugh it off? Do you give them more information than they earned? That is what they are measuring. Not your words, your reaction. And the first sign you failed is simple. You explained when you should have observed. Maybe they made a small comment about you being too sensitive. Maybe they challenged a boundary and waited to see whether you would defend yourself or protect their comfort. And before you even realize what happened, you are talking. You explain that you are not difficult. You explain that you are not selfish. You explain that you had a good reason. But here's the part most people miss. They may not be listening to understand you. They may be watching what pressure does to you. Because if one small comment can pull you out of observation and into self-defense, they just learned something. They learned pressure can make you start proving yourself. And once they know that, the next test usually gets smaller, sharper, and more personal. Before we go further, let's be clear. This is not about diagnosing someone from one conversation. A real diagnosis belongs with trained professionals. This is about noticing a pattern of pressure, reaction, and control. One awkward moment can be nothing. Someone can make a bad joke. Someone can ask too much. Someone can be immature, rude, anxious, or socially clumsy without being a psychopath. But repeated pressure plus your discomfort plus their benefit is different. The point is not paranoia, the point is pattern recognition. And you did not fail because you were weak. You failed because you treated a test like a normal conversation. The second sign is more dangerous because it feels like good manners. You apologize for having a boundary. Maybe this has happened to you if someone asks for a favor that feels a little too big. A coworker asks you to cover something on a day you already said you were unavailable. A new acquaintance asks to borrow something you do not feel comfortable lending. Your body says no first, but your mouth tries to soften it. You say, "I'm so sorry. I really wish I could. It's just that I already promised I would be somewhere else." The truth may be on your side, but the framing matters. Your no came wrapped in a request for permission to have a limit. In that moment, you thought you were being polite. But with the wrong person, politeness can be read as compliance. They learn that your boundary is not just a boundary, it is a negotiation. They learn that if they look disappointed, push harder, or make you feel selfish, you might explain until you talk yourself out of your own limit. That does not mean you should become rude. It means your manners should not become a handle someone else can pull. A boundary does not need guilt attached to it to be valid. The third sign is that you gave them more information than they earned. Someone asks a question that feels slightly too personal. Not openly aggressive, just too soon. Maybe it is. About your past, your money, your relationship, why you left a job, or why you are not close with someone anymore. Instead of pausing, you start filling the silence. You give the context, the reasons, the emotions, the backstory. Part of you thinks, "I'm just being honest." But honesty with the wrong person can become an information leak. They are not just listening to your story. They may be cataloging what moves you, what embarrasses you, what makes you defensive, what you still feel guilty about, what you are desperate to be understood for. That is the difference between connection and extraction. A safe person hears your story and treats it with care. A predatory person hears your story and starts noticing where the handles are. You thought you were connecting. They may have been collecting. The first 3 signs showed them what leaks out of you. The next 4 show whether they have already started using it. The fourth sign is that you accepted a baseline of disrespect. This often starts as a joke. Someone makes a comment about your work, your looks, your intelligence, your mistake, or the way you reacted. It is sharp enough to sting, but soft enough that if you object, they can say, "Relax, I was only joking." Now, a single bad joke may just be a bad joke. People misspeak. People try to be funny and fail, but a repeated joke that always lowers you is different. That is a low-risk probe. They are testing whether your social guard is awake. If you laugh along even though it hurt, they learn something. If you insult yourself to make them comfortable, they learn more. The joke is not always the test. Your silence after the joke may be. Because the real question is not whether they can make a comment. The real question is whether they can lower your position and get you to help them disguise it as humor. That is how a baseline shifts. First, it is one joke. Then it becomes your role. The fifth sign is one of the most exhausting. You started negotiating for understanding. This does not mean expressing your feelings is weak. In healthy relationships, explanation can repair things. Understanding matters. But with someone who benefits from your confusion, more explanation may only give them more control. Maybe you say, "I just want you to understand why that hurt me." So they turn it into a debate. You give examples. They challenge the examples. You clarify your words. They twist the clarification. And suddenly, you are not talking about what they did anymore. You are defending how you reacted to what they did. That is the trap. You tried to logic your way out of something that was never about logic. Sometimes they already understand enough. They understand where it hurts. They understand what you want from them. They know you are waiting for them to admit it. And because your peace depends on their validation, they can withhold that validation whenever they want to keep you off balance. Sign 1 was about over-explaining your reasons. This is different. Sign 5 is about over-explaining your pain. You are trying to make someone acknowledge the damage while they are still benefiting from doing it. The sixth sign is that you rewarded pressure with access. This is where the test starts changing shape. It is no longer only about what you reveal, it is about what pressure can make you give. Go back to that person asking for the favor. At first you said no, maybe softly, but still you said no. Then they kept asking. They acted disappointed. They joked that you were being difficult. They said, "It will only take a minute." They said, "I would do it for you." They made the request feel smaller and your boundary feel larger. And eventually, you gave them something. A call, a reply, a favor, an explanation, more time. More emotional energy, more access than you wanted to give. You thought you were being flexible, but they may have learned something simpler. Pressure works. If pressure gets rewarded, pressure becomes the method. Access is not just your time, it is your attention, your emotional availability, your willingness to keep answering, your habit of proving that you are fair. Once someone learns that pressure gives them more access to you, they do not need to respect your first answer. They just need to keep pressing until your discomfort becomes easier than your boundary. The seventh sign is the slow boil. You failed because you judged each move separately instead of reading the whole game. You saw small conversations. They may have seen a completed audit of your defenses. You look at the joke as just one joke. The apology as just good manners. The personal question as just curiosity. The favor as just helping out. The pressure as just persistence. So you judge each moment separately instead of reading the pattern. And that is exactly why the pattern works. Because no single moment feels big enough to confront. But after every interaction, you feel a little more drained, a little more defensive, a little more careful, a little less like yourself. That is the part to notice. One moment can be nothing, but repeated pressure plus your discomfort plus their benefit is a fingerprint. The test was not one dramatic scene. It was 7 small moments you kept explaining away. Go back to the person who asked for the favor. In hindsight, the sequence becomes clearer. They started with a small joke to see if you would laugh. They asked for a little more than they had earned. They watched you explain. They watched you apologize. They watched you give details. They watched you reward pressure with access, and once they knew you could be moved, they may have marked you as easier to control. Not because you were weak, because your manners gave them something to pull on. That realization is uncomfortable, but it gives you the one thing the test was designed to take from you: awareness. Once you see the test, you do not have to keep auditioning inside it. You can stop explaining when you should be observing. You can stop apologizing for having a limit. You can stop handing over the whole story to someone who has not earned the whole story. You can notice when a joke is actually lowering your position. You can stop pleading for understanding from someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. You can watch what happens when pressure no longer gets access. That is the shift. Not from kind to cold, from readable to observant. If you feel that old urge to defend your no, pause. Watch the reaction. What do they do when they do not get what they want? Do they respect it? Do they adjust? Do they move on? Or do they guilt you, rush you, mock you, punish you, or make themselves the victim? That reaction is the real information. You do not need to convince them that your boundary is valid. You need to notice what kind of person tries to negotiate it. And this connects directly to the first test psychopaths use before they target you. Because before they control anything, they usually measure what you do under small pressure. And if you want to see the audit reversed, look at the questions psychopaths and narcissists struggle to answer honestly. Because the same manners they use against you are often the ones they cannot maintain when the pressure turns back on them. Watch the video on screen next. It shows the first test psychopaths use before they target you, before the audit even begins.